Hi, welcome to the session Embedding Local Capital Lessons from Community Investment Fund Programs in Canada. My name is Alex Petric, and I'm a research assistant at the University of Guelph.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Gibson, and I am the Liberal Professor of Rural Economic Development at the University of Guelph. Today, I wanted to share recent research into a set of programs which we are calling Community Investment Fund Programs, or CIFs. We wanted to look at CIFs, particularly how they're operating in Canada, but particularly we want to share some of the implications it has for rural economic development and community development across Canada.
As an overview for this presentation, we'll start out by talking about what community investment funds are and how they work. We'll also briefly discuss the methodology that went into the research that we conducted. After that, we'll share some of the major findings that came out of this research that we've done. And finally, we'll close with some policy implications and next steps in terms of what these findings suggest for rural economic and community development policy. So to start off, the first question to answer is, what are community investment funds and what do they aim to do?
So community investment funds solve a problem or a challenge that has often confronted communities, which is the access to financial capital. Community investment funds are a vehicle in which people can make investments into activities that are locally based to support the local economy. For rural communities, access to financial services can often be challenging, whether this is a need for a loan to start a business, whether it is related to expanding a current business, or even perhaps adopting new technology. This access to financial capital can often be difficult to acquire outside of the major cities, which is one of the opportunities that community investment funds may present themselves. We also know that many Canadians are already actively investing through banks and investment funds and other financial vehicles, but this is often done through large urban centers. We also know that there are many Canadians that want to invest locally in their community or their region, but often have a struggle for how to do that. Community investment funds also aim to connect local citizen investors to these local businesses. And because the community investment funds are created through the securities commissions that oversee the investments to ensure that they're made responsible in qualifying organizations at the end of the day. Community investment funds have been used as a program to provide tax credits or deductions on investments to encourage people to participate and to fuel the local investment. These programs have been explicitly done for rural development and have often been directed by provincial ministries for rural development or rural affairs. However, the programs are usually open to any small business, regardless of their location. The community investment programs are well aligned to principles of place-based development. They're typically focused on using existing resources within a community or a region, and they tailor development approaches to the community needs. These programs also have the opportunity to align to social impact investing, whereby they're creating social goods through the investments in these different community organizations. On the screen, you can see an example of the tax credits that are provided in the places where community investment funds have operated. You can see that they range kind of from the 15% for a corporation in New Brunswick, all the way to the high of 50% or even 125% of the value in the province of Quebec. And this creates a strong catalyst for people to make investments in these various programs.
Across Canada, there are several provinces that have enacted community investment fund programs. At the moment, Manitoba, Quebec, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Nova Scotia all have existing programs. And in the past, Alberta briefly had a program similar to these, but it has since shut that program down. In British Columbia, there's also a equity-based tax credit that is available for business investments. but we've not included it in this study because it is less focused on community development, and it tends to instead focus on sectors where there is a high expected growth rate within a particular industry. So for this study, as we mentioned, we were interested in evaluating the effectiveness of community investment fund programs and how they are impacting rural communities across Canada. And so now we'll briefly overview what this research actually involved. The first thing that we did in order to conduct this research was we did a scan of the gray literature and government websites in order to see what information we could gain through these sources on these programs. So this would include the histories of these programs, the requirements for eligibility, the political contexts in which they've been created, and other associated details that we could find online. We also looked for information that might be available about the types of organizations that were using these programs and about any financial impacts or community impacts that these programs would have had. And following that, we conducted a series of 16 semi-structured interviews with key informants that included provincial staffers, current and former CIF program participants, social enterprises that would be involved in similar social economy activities and that would be interested in these sorts of programs, and also legal consultants who could speak more to the technical side of these programs. And now we'll share a few of the major research findings that came out of these interviews and research. So one thing that became clear as we were going through this research was that there are many different types of uses that CIFs have been used for. Some of the things that they've been supporting include simple food and beverage businesses like coffee roasteries and breweries and things like that. There are also groups that have provided financial support or through loans for agricultural businesses, and this has been particularly important in some areas where the agri-food business has been undergoing a number of major changes due to other societal and economic trends. Also, there have been a number of clean energy businesses, particularly wind energy, that have made good use of these programs, and also, as well, fishing cooperatives have been engaged in some areas in CIF programs. Finally, there are also some funds that have more generally been focused on a particular region and provided investments for a wide array of businesses within a particular region. So on screen here, you can see there are a number of logos from groups and organizations that have used these sorts of programs, but they're of course only a small sample of the ones that are there.
And building on what you just mentioned, Alex, there are kind of three broad concepts that also emerged from the findings. And these relate to the role of cooperatives, business succession, and globalization. One of the common themes that emerged was the role of cooperative businesses that already have a potential investor base and can be very successful program participants. Programs start to evolve or be created. Ensuring that there's a strong linkage to the cooperative movement seems to be a critical success factor. We also know that many rural communities and many rural businesses are starting to think about or are putting in place plans around business succession. And a number of the interview participants that are involved with the community investment funds noted the potential affinity between business succession planning and the community investment program. So as current business owners are looking at retiring and thinking about who might take over their business, the CIF program could allow current staff to pool resources to take a share or take a stake in the company at the end of the day. And the other broad trend that we saw coming out of these interview findings is the notion that the community investment funds may be a vehicle to actually counterbalance what we've seen around wealth mobility through themes like globalization. Globalization has largely led to the outflow of wealth from rural and small communities, but the community investment program appears to work against these trends. There is the opportunity for rural residents as well as urban residents to actually invest their wealth into rural communities and rural regions. At the moment, the uptake is quite small, but there is the potential for this to substantially change.
And as well, another major finding that we found had to do with the support that is available for these programs from provincial governments, which generally run them. Um, uh, an important lesson comes from Nova Scotia's CEDIF program, or the Community Economic Development Investment Fund program. When it was first established, it had a particular staff member who was devoted to working with community groups in order to get them more involved and really increase participation in the program. Um, that person also helped these groups to figure out how to work through governmental processes and provide all the information that was necessary for these programs, since they do involve quite a bit of legal knowledge in order to navigate them. However, since that position that a staff member had has been removed so that this support was not there for the program, the interest in the program has slowed over time. And other CIF programs that have been inspired by Nova Scotia's success have not really seen the same level of success that Nova Scotia did. And we believe that it may be in part due to a lack of that staff support for them. In looking at this from a governmental standpoint, it appears that the impact that these programs can have on businesses and on community development easily justifies the costs that a particular staff member would entail in order to provide that support. In addition to the legal aspects of navigating these programs, another a side piece that is important for program support is that in many areas, the idea of CIFs, which largely work on an equity-based system rather than a loan system, they may not be part of the broader culture in which they are being implemented, and so locals may take a bit of time to understand them. So having that program support can really be important for getting people involved and participating.
So this brings us to kind of where do we go from here? As we've been analyzing the data that was collected from the literature and the interviews, we know there is still more work to be done, but we wanted to share some policy implications and some next steps with everybody. In particular, there's 4 policy implications that emerge. The first is that those provinces with a community investment fund program have largely been well received. Nova Scotia, as was mentioned by Alex, seems to have the largest uptake, where other provinces' CIF programs may be a newer, may not have seen that uptake, but have been well received. So the implication here is that other provinces without a community investment program should consider this program to support rural economic development goals. The second implication is that we heard through our key informant interviews that how to monitor and evaluate these programs needs to be carefully considered, and we need to ensure that we have the correct goals and evaluation tools as we start to create CIF programs and we measure their success. The third implication was mentioned just moments ago, and that's the need for dedicated support staff to help promote the program, to educate potential partners, and to ensure that there is the engagement and helping assist program participants through the processes, which can be complex due to the engagement of the Security Commission in each province. But it was clear that without that support, these programs are unlikely to reach their full potential. And the final implication noted here is that provinces with a community investment program should explore ways to create a community of practice for learning and support amongst both policy makers, but as well as program participants, that they can share their best practices as well as ideas and ways to enhance the program. In terms of our next steps, we're excited by this research and we're happy to continue the conversation with anyone that is interested. There are a few next steps, though, that we will be taking or wish to encourage others to take as well. First is that these programs need much further research to better assess financial impacts, their relationship to community economic development, and the broader notions of kind of community resilience and rural development. There's also a need for additional research to look at what scale is the most appropriate for community investment funds, so that we can look at it through a rural lens. And finally, We're excited to say that this research study has been submitted for publication, and we're hoping that it'll be out in the coming months, and we'll be sure to share that with everyone.
As Ryan mentioned, we're quite happy to speak more about this research, and so if anyone is interested, viewers can contact us either by email or through the Twitter accounts that we have on our slide here.
And just as a final note, we hope everyone found this presentation insightful and enlightening and thought-provoking. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and we look forward to any future engagement and conversations.